So welcome to Bunny's Designs. This is a live stream with live peoples. It's recorded for Ustream.tv and also for YouTube for people to watch at their leisure. And thank you for all our wonderful messages about hubby, who's on the mend, bless him. So thank you for all your fantastic messages. With hubby being ill in hospital, I kind of threw this bag, this little colour book in with me, because of course you're waiting about and you're sitting about a lot, and so I've resorted back to a water brush, which I never thought I would do because they're just a bit too wet to get some really nice colour effects. But hospitals, or if you're on the sofa, or you don't want the fact that you've got a pot of water kicking about, they're really, really good. And I found another way to make them a little bit drier so you don't crinkle your pages. And I'm not really over obsessed about crinkling pages, but I just don't like them to be crinkled because I like them to be nice and flat, because when you turn it over you want the page to be flat to work on behind. So that's mainly why. But I use a little baby wipe, and I found that if you dry off your brush, you've still got the same dampness that you would with another brush or a dry rigger. So you can actually still work quite well with a water brush, but not have it saturated, so if the minute you touch the page the colour floods everywhere. So I managed to do a couple of pages while I was in there. Again, my little book is quite handy because I was one-handed. I could flick this book, and of course you've got all your water and your brush together, and you just flick and you see a colour. And I used the tea rose. There was a red rose, but I love the Peerless tea rose red. And so I just touched. I've used quite a lot of it now, but it has been for a good few years, these. But the tea rose one is my favourite, and it managed to do all these colours. And so a little bit of colour on here, and touched. What happens was you have quite a lot of colour on, so you do certain sections, and by the time you've worked around the rose, you've got paler sections. So when you go back to a darker section, you've got a natural highlight. So you could actually get, sorry, Alfie's in the room and he's managed to do what he wanted to do. He's opened the door. So it's very good for doing this, and you get a really nice effect with very little effort, and I really like that. So again, it was difficult to concentrate, but I just managed to have a bit of a play, and hubby was having a sleep because hospitals you don't sleep very well, so I could hold hubby's hand. He didn't want to talk, and so I could just sit and do this, but he knew I was there, so that was quite good, and it was very comforting. I always say art is therapy. If you're in pain, or if you've got a little bit of trouble, or you're not very happy, it's very, very good for the soul, is a little bit of colouring in. Although I'm supposed to be an artist, sometimes I really cannot be bothered, and my hands won't let me now sketch my own drawings. So I find great comfort in colouring other people's. And so again, you don't have to think of, oh my goodness, what am I going to draw, and sit there with a blank page. So it's really good to have a really nice colour book that you're going to enjoy colouring, that you're going to really think, oh yes, I like that, and see a few colours. And it's very, very comforting. As I say, sometimes all you want is just a little bit of a colour, a damp brush, and then you're not dipping in, and you don't have to move things. Everything is within reach. So even if you can't move your elbow, everything is within reach, and I found that really, really comforting. So we did that one, and that was with the Peerless, and then the leaves, there's quite a few different colours there, oh sorry, shades, but they're all from one colour. They're all from I can't pronounce this one. I think it's myrtle. I don't know. I haven't spelt it right, but I've put myrtle green. And it's quite a nice green. I don't know. I've put myrtle green, but I've put the wrong green. I can't read my own writing, but I've put myrtle green. It's not mottle, it's myrtle, I think. And all that green has come from those little dots there. So when I wanted it pale, I went to the pale bit, and when I wanted it dark, sorry. Oh dear. Shall we have to have a sooty cam now? Sooty's arrived. Hi Sooty. This is the one boy you've probably not seen. Sooty. This is our little boy who was hit by a car outside. Come here, Sooty. This is the big boy. This is the big boy. This is our beautiful Sooty, who's always a grumpy boy. Aren't you? You purring? And he's got a stitch missing off his face, because when he was a kitten he was hit by a car, and he had to have his jaw wired because he broke his jaw, and he grew faster than the stitches. But he goes outside a lot, and he's a naughty boy. He's a killer, bless him. He goes and terrorises the neighbourhood. We have fields at the back. So this is our big Sooty, who likes to be in the way and centre of attention, don't you, Sooty? Yes, I know. We'll have a big kiss then, thank you. But he's a real shiny boy. You're going to sit there, are you? But he is quite a large boy. Aren't you, Sooty? He's spoilt because he was hit by a car, but he was rescued as well. So I'm just going to pop him down now, which could be quite difficult. Did you really want to go in there and annoy him? Under there, please. Under there, please, and sit. And sit, Alfie. Alfie, sit. Good boy. Alfie sat. There we go then. So sorry about that. That's the Sooty cam. The bunnies are doing very well. We've just weaned them. They went to Mummy 2 days ago, and they didn't want to know her, so they don't need Mummy anymore. So we'll have a bunny cam another time. It's a bit fraught around here at the moment. So I was talking about, sorry about that. The Peerless. So when you use this little book, there is a difference. When you use, these are all water-based medium, either a crayon or the Peerless come like that, but the I can't say it, sorry, wait a second. My brain is in super mode. Kuretake Gansai Tambi watercolours. They are a pan, but when you use them from here, you have more control. So if you use them from a pan, you've got very strong colours, but here we've got that again, that colour grade, 10 shades from 1. So if you go into the strongest colour, you're going to get the vibrant colour. If you're going into the weak one, you get some really subtle pastel shades. Probably see that better with the reds and the greens. So it's darker and lighter. And they've been in here a good year, I think, maybe longer, maybe 2 years. So they're doing very well. The Caran d'Ache are crayons. Scratch the colour into a square. All the pencils with a watermark on, a paintbrush mark, they're all in here, scratched in squares. Normally about 3 layers. When you start to see dust, you know the paper's not going to take any more. And again, I use good quality sketchbook paper. The sketchbook paper that will take a light wash. And again, that has any sketchbook paper that has the water brush mark on it means it will take a light wash. It doesn't mean to say you can saturate it and do wet on wet. It means you can use a brush, a damp brush, and you can watercolour on it, but you can't really do wet on wet. But you will be able to do a slight watercolour on it. And that's the sketchbook paper that I've been using. So it's not the most expensive, but it's not children's cheaper either. And you find that the colour sits on, so even though you've wet the page, they're not disintegrating. So I've had these for years and they're still doing okay. The reason mine are on squares is I thought if I used more of one colour they would disintegrate, and I didn't want to waste the whole page. But actually what happens is absolutely nothing. There's quite a lot used on some of these, and all you do is scribble over the top. And there is a video that I did revamping the Derwent Inktense. I went over every colour, and so this was done about a year ago, I think. They were revamped, but of course I've been using them again since. But you have a lot more control. So this is Derwent Inktense pencils used from a paper palette with, it was actually a number 1 Derwent brush. So the Derwent brush, I dried it off a little bit so it was barely damp. I touched it and then I coloured dark and then dark, and then when it got lighter I moved it about a bit. That's all that was done with that one brush and one colour. This was done with Derwent pencils, and I think it's the same colour if I have a look. Oh no, it might not be the same colour. But this was done by scribbling a tiny bit of pencil first. So let me just have a look for a colour. So I scratched a little bit of colour on here like this, and then took a water brush, took most of the dampness out, water out, so it's just barely damp, and then manipulated it, activated it and manipulated it as a watercolour. Now the Derwent, you see, it went a bit too wet, that one. I like the number 1, that's the number 2. I like number 1 best. And these colours are more vibrant because we scribbled the colour onto the page. These are more subtle colours, a more watercolour effect, because we're using a brush and just taking a small amount of colour. You can still get vibrant colours, it's just I like having that control because you get a lovely watercolour effect and you've still got the vibrancy of the Inktense pencils. So if there's a page that I want it to be vibrant, I will stay at home and I will use the pencils. If there's one that I think can be lovely and soft, then I'll use my little book. So you can do that. There are some pages that you really do not want to be kind of pale and pastel colours. And in that case, you know, you want to colour them at home, but I thought this would look quite nice. And I love the Derwent pencils, the Derwent watercolour pencils, for that reason. This one was scratched. Again, quite vibrant Derwent pastel colours. Sorry, Derwent Inktense pencils. So there's different ways to work depending on the different effect you want in the book. And again, I like the fact that not all my pages are all identical. Some are done with the Derwent Inktense pencils, and some are done with the watercolour pencils, and then some are done with the colours that I've got at the front. So these are little squares of pans of professional watercolours. But I want to put all my watercolours in here. So I have, just 2 seconds, if I can get it without making an avalanche. In this particular tin, oh actually in this tin as well actually, and I took this all around Ireland and never touched it. I think I touched it for about 2 minutes. So what I did with this is I put my tubes, my laptop keeps going off, come back please. I put the tubes here of all my colours. I made this little flap from plastic, cut it to match, and then I've put all my little pans in here, and they were from the tin of the Derwent professional Derwent watercolours in the little tin, and round the outside I have my peerless. Oh, I do apologise. I have my hydrus, which are ink based. Sorry, I tell a lie, they're not ink based. Somebody said that on YouTube last night. I was watching it. The hydrus, Dr. Martin's hydrus PH, are a liquid watercolour, a professional liquid watercolour. They are not an ink. Inktense pencils and Inktense blocks are ink based. They are not a watercolour. The Ecoline, which is very similar to the hydrus, are not a watercolour. They are ink based. But these beautiful hydrus, Dr. Martin's hydrus professional liquid watercolours are a liquid watercolour, whereas the Ecoline is ink based. The Inktense pencils and the Inktense blocks are ink based, and I do believe that the peerless are a kind of an ink base as well. These aren't, I don't think these are a watercolour, I think these are ink based, but everything else in here is a watercolour base. It's basically a watercolour. It's just that when you put water to these, they react like a watercolour, very similar to the pastels. The pastels are not a watercolour. Pastels are very similar, and they don't have a lot of pigment and binder in them. Sorry, they don't have a lot of binder in them, but they have a lot of pigment. So that's why they react like a watercolour. So I can get some lovely watercolour effects from using pastels with a damp brush. But technically, they are not a watercolour. But they react like a watercolour. So as much as I love this, my intention is to get all these colours. I've already got all these colours, and I'm going to put all these colours, the tubes, are going in my little book. So if I want to go out and do some watercolouring, I can take this. But if I just want to do some colouring in with watercolours, I can have them in my book. So all these tubes, I'm going to make some little squares. Haven't decided how big I want the square yet. I think this is the paper that I'm going to put the actual paint on, or the pigment on, but I'm going to use these little, they're too nice and I'm a tight Yorkshire lass. There's I've got some of these little postcards, and they're a bit stronger, so my idea is to use one of these as the actual page, and then put the squares on here of colour. If I find my little pile of squares somewhere, I have a pile of squares somewhere. So I'm going to put the tube of paint onto here. I'm going to label it, and I'm going to do a colour swatch, and then I'm going to stick it onto there, and then this will be stuck onto the page, and that's going to make that just that little bit stronger, and then I'll have the same on the other side. So that's going to be quite strong, because that's going to last me a long time. If you're going to use this is professional watercolour, I want it to be in there for quite a long time. And this one is actually on one of these postcards because they're quite stiff. Because you're not going to touch the card, you're going to touch the colour, but there's a couple of millimetres of colour on those. So that was my intention. My little mouse is broken on my... I don't know why. So I'm going to put those into my little book next time. And I use these for labelling the edges as well, so if I need to know where things are, that's what I can use. So I'm going to go through the colours and see how many I've got and plan it out. And I think that's important. That's what I was going to start with, is you have to think about, if you want to make a book, what supplies you have, how you use your supplies, and how you want to put, do you want them all in the book, or do you just want some in a book, or which you use for colouring. Do you want to make the book a little bit more, if you wanted to go outside and do some proper watercolouring, you could make pages of just one colour. You probably wear your pencil down once, but you could get a whole page, but then that page would last you a long time if you were going out using it as a proper watercolour pad instead of taking out the little pan sets. So you have to decide what you're going to use your little book for. You could make it A5 size and put it in the back of a book, or you could make it A4 size, and then your squares could be bigger, or your squares could be the same size but have all reds on one page and all reds and yellows on another page. So I would take all, if I did this again, I'd take all the pinks of all the different makes of colour, and I would put them all together. So because I use this book like that, I don't normally use it as just Inktense, just Peerless, just Caran d'Ache. I mix them all together. I just look for a colour, and I find that colour and I use it, and then I might go to somewhere else for a different colour. And again, that's why this book lasts longest, because I don't use one particular make of colour. I mix and match. The only one I don't do that with is the Graphitint. I normally don't use the Graphitint. I only use that on one page. I don't normally mix, but again, I might actually change my mind soon. If I want some kind of metal type effect, I think that would look quite good. So you need to decide what you're going to use your little book for, and then you've got to decide what size you want it, what you're going to use it for, and then what supplies you want to put in it. If you have your pencils and you always want to use your pencils, there's not much point putting them in here. So I hope that was helpful, and I think I'm going to just do short videos because my attention span is not very good, and so I'm going to do so thank you for watching, and I'll probably put these in the next one. So thanks for watching.